Hey guys, welcome to Arcran's Arcanum. I'm Arcran, and today we're talking about illusions, and more specifically how to DM for illusions. Illusions are one of the trickiest things to DM for in 5th edition because it's this huge mismatch between what you as the DM know, as well as what the NPCs know. And if you don't strike the right balance, illusion spells can either trivialize most encounters, or be completely useless and frustrate your players. Fortunately, not all illusion spells are tricky. A lot of them just have a spell that you cast and it does a thing, and there's no real interpretation or arbitration required. Those aren't the spells we're focusing on in this video. We're focusing on the ones that are like major image and create a illusory construct, and how do you react to that, how do NPCs react to that, and what are the limitations of those different spells, because just from the book, the wording isn't perfectly clear on what they can and can't do. With that in mind, we're going to just run through some of the more common illusion spells so you know what they can and can't do and can get a good baseline for what illusion spells are capable of, and see if we can get some good general rules established as we go. First up is our humble cantrip, Minor Illusion. Now, Minor Illusion can do two things. It can either make an illusion of an object, or it can make the illusion of a sound. If you choose the sound option, the spell's pretty self-explanatory. It can be as quiet as a whisper, it can be as loud as a scream, it can sound like speech, so you can use it to talk. When you cast a spell, you can choose to have the sound just go on for the full minute duration of Minor Illusion, or you can choose to have several different sounds play in sequence. The only thing to note there is that all has to be chosen when you cast the spell. If you want new sounds that you didn't choose when you first cast the spell, you'll have to cast it again. The object option for this spell looks very simple, but it kind of brings us to the first big issue with illusion spells and how they're written. What's the difference between an object and a creature? If I were to make an illusion of a taxidermy wolf, which is an object, versus an illusion of an actual wolf, which is a creature, what's different there, and how does that interact with the illusion spells? For the purposes of an illusion spell, and how I run this in general, is that if something can only create an object, like Minor Illusion, it can't move. It's a very stationary thing. If an illusion can create a creature, it comes with a little bit of automated movement that makes it look convincing. For the purposes of Minor Illusion, this means anything we create an illusion of is frozen in time. It's not moving at all in any way, which if you're making a chair or a crate, that's fine, those don't move on their own. But if you're creating the illusion of a creature, it gets a little bit less realistic because all those natural movements aren't there. The rest of Minor Illusion is pretty simple. It can only be an audio or visual illusion. It can't have light, heat, etc. And it also introduces what are going to be our 3 general rules for most illusion spells. The first is that any physical interaction with an illusion reveals it as an illusion. If you try to pick up the illusion of a chair, your hands go right through it and you know it's an illusion now. The next rule is that as an action, any creature can make an investigation check against the spell save DC of whoever casts the illusion. So they can look at it and try to find, small flaws and things that give away that it's not real, and if they beat that spell save DC, then they know that it's an illusion. The final rule is that if a creature knows that something is an illusion, either through physical interaction or that investigation check we talked about, then they can see through it. It becomes faint to them and it's not really obstructing their vision. They know it's not there, and because of that, they can see through it, or the noise that is being created isn't quite as loud. Next up is the first level spell, Silent Image, which is basically just a beefed up version of the visual option for Minor Illusion. It can be bigger and it can be objects or creatures this time. This means that you can have that basic movement and anything you create will look alive, which is really helpful. When you first cast Silent Image, the illusion stays where you cast it. But as an action, you can move it, and the spell specifically says that it does what it needs to make the movement look natural, whether that be walking or flying or whatever it needs to do. With that, we know that significant movement by an illusion requires the spellcaster's action. So that brings us to the question of how much movement is free because the illusion is of a creature, and how much movement requires the spellcaster's action. In general, I would say that anything simple that could be more or less looped is free. So flames flickering, something breathing, a ogre smacking a big club against its hand, that all just is free and a part of the illusion spell. Significant movement like running, walking, flying, or making an attack, that's going to take the spellcaster's action. If you want an ogre looming over an enemy looking intimidating, the illusion just does that. If you want the illusion to actually be taking swings at that enemy and narrowly missing, that takes your action. Beyond introducing our question of how much locomotion is free for an illusion, silent image is really simple. It only does a visual illusion, hence the name silent image, and it follows the same rules for revealing it as minor illusion. Either physical interaction or an investigation check reveal it, and once it's revealed, the illusion becomes faint and translucent. I also want to briefly cover another first level spell, Disguise Self, because it ignores some of the rules that we've established so far. In terms of its effect, Disguise Self is really simple. You look like a different creature, you can change your height by a set amount, and that's it. The thing to note here is that while an investigation check or physical contact reveal Disguise Self as an illusion, the illusion doesn't become translucent or faint once it's revealed. You still look like that creature, even though things know it's an illusion, which makes Disguise Self a really good disguise, which you would assume from the spell's name, but it also means that it's pretty much a mask that no one can take off short of Dispel Magic. Our next spell is the second level spell, Phantasmal Force. Unlike the previous illusions we've covered, which are visible to every creature, Phantasmal Force is targeted against one creature, and they are the only creature that sees that illusion. If a target fails their saving throw against the spell, a very convincing illusion appears in their mind. It covers all senses, and the target will rationalize anything that doesn't make sense about the illusion just as a part of it. Even more, if the target thinks they should take damage from the illusion because it looks dangerous or something like that, whether it be a lion chasing after them or flames all around them, they actually take damage because they are so convinced in the reality of this illusion that it just hits them. The only way to break out of this illusion if you fail the initial saving throw is to make an investigation check against the spell save DC of the caster to realize that it's an illusion. But the problem is, there's no reason the target would ever make that investigation check. They rationalize any illogical outcomes of the spell as real as a part of it. There's nothing that would indicate to them there's an illusion here, I should check it out. Going directly off those rules, Phantasmal Force can be an incredibly powerful spell because it doesn't even take that clever of a player to come up with an illusion that the target will focus on over the party, whether that be trying to kill it or trying to escape from it. Because of this, I would recommend that anytime a target under the effect of Phantasmal Force does nothing other than interact with the illusion on its turn, whether it's trying to break out of something or attack something that's not really there, have it make an investigation check instead of taking the action it would normally take. For example, say a creature under the effects of Phantasmal Force is forced to see handcuffs on themselves. Instead of making an athletics check to break out of them, they are still flavor-wise trying to break out of these handcuffs, but mechanically they're making that investigation check. Even with this slight change, Phantasmal Force is still an incredibly powerful and versatile spell, and your players can still use it in a lot of cool and interesting ways. This just makes it so creatures will actually make an investigation check to escape, because as written, that'll never happen. The last thing I want to mention is a common misconception about Phantasmal Force. When you create the illusion, it says that it has to be within a 10-foot cube. This is a constraint on the size of the illusion and not a constraint on its location. If you use Phantasmal Force to create the illusion of an ogre, it can't be taller than 10 feet because it has to fit within that 10-foot cube, but it can still move around and chase the target. It's a perfectly convincing, realistic illusion. Of course it can move and chase them, otherwise it wouldn't be perfectly realistic and convincing. With that done, next up is our third level spell, Major Image. Now, Major Image is basically just silent image on steroids. It can do more senses, it's bigger, and it's just all around better. All of the rules we've established make Major Image really easy to handle. It can make creatures, so any visual illusion could have some basic automation and basic looping movement to make it look convincing. And as an action, you can make it do bigger, better, scarier movements. You can create all of the other senses as a part of the same illusion, with the stipulation that they're never intense enough to cause damage. You can't make enough noise to cause thunder damage or a nasty enough smell to make a creature poisoned, but you can still make them extremely convincing and realistic. The other thing to note is that when you use your action to move the illusion, you can also change other things about it. You can change how it sounds, how it smells, you can change the sound enough so that your illusion is just carrying on a conversation. You have a lot more leeway, and this is the first illusion that's very realistic while also being very flexible and changeable on the fly. Major Image follows the same rules as Minor Illusion and Silent Image for seeing through it. Either physical interaction with the illusion or investigation check reveal it as an illusion, and once you know it's an illusion, all of the sensory effects that it causes become faint and you can kind of see through them or ignore them. Another thing to keep in mind for Major Image is that because it replicates all senses, it might fool some creatures' blind sense. This isn't something that's very clear from the book on how blind sense works, but if their blind sense is based off sense of smell or hearing, Major Image can replicate those things and it might appear real to those creatures. Something that may not be as relevant to your players, but you should keep in mind as the DM, is that if you cast Major Image as a 6th level spell, it's permanent and it sticks around forever without concentration. This means that if you plan to have permanent illusions as a part of a dungeon or as some part of your campaign, Major Image is probably the spell you want to base them off of and follow its limitations and rules and what those illusions can do. And with Major Image, we've kind of covered all of the illusions that we really need to worry about. As you get into higher level illusion spells, they actually become a lot clearer on what they do, and a lot of them are just better versions of low level spells. Like Seeming is basically just disguise self on a group of people. The only high level illusion that you might want to take a look at ahead of time is Programmed Illusion. It's not as convincing as Major Image is, it's only visual and sounds. There's no other senses, no heat, nothing like that. But the cool thing about Programmed Illusion is that it lasts forever and it just goes off when a set condition is there. So you cast it on a spot, and if someone enters the room the illusion is in, it pops up, says a message, and then goes away. This is one of those spells that I kind of think of as a DM spell, where it's going to rarely be useful to players, but you can use this at the start of a dungeon to warn the players not to go further or something like that. It's really useful as a DM tool, and it's a good spell to be aware of. If you want an illusion that's always there, a 6th level Major Image does the job, but if you want an illusion that pops up, says a cryptic message, and then goes away, Programmed Illusion is what you're going to look at. The last thing I want to cover before we get into just more general how to run the game with illusions type stuff is the invisible status. 5th edition is slightly unintuitive with how invisibility works. While you can't be seen, the game still assumes that everyone knows where you are in combat. The only time that your location is completely unknown is if you take the hide action, which you can do at any point when you're invisible because you're unseen, but unless you take your action to hide, everyone is still assumed to generally know where you are within a 5-foot cube. If this is unintuitive to you, that makes sense. It's kind of a weird ruling. If you need to rationalize it better, instead of thinking of invisibility as you're gone completely, think of it more like the cloaks from like Halo, where even though you are invisible, there's still that like slight shimmer that creatures can use to see you, and unless you hold perfectly still, they can still know where you are. You're just a lot harder to see and a lot harder to hit. Now that we've gone over the spells, it's time to go over how we can run the game and make sure that our players' illusions feel useful without making our NPCs a bunch of bumbling idiots. Now, throughout the illusion spells, there's only 2 main ways to know definitively that something is an illusion. The first is to physically interact with that, whether it's touching it, attacking it, whatever. Or 2, to make an investigation check against the spell save DC of the caster, and if you succeed, you know it's an illusion. If you fail, it looks real to you. While that helps us somewhat, when an NPC would make an investigation check against an illusion or something like that is really unclear. In my mind, there's really 2 scenarios that we need to worry about: illusions in combat and illusions out of combat. Illusions in combat are the easiest. For the most part, if a player casts an illusion spell, the people they're fighting are going to treat it as real. If a wizard waves their arms, says some magic words, and a wall appears in front of them, you're not going to try to run through the wall because it might not be real, you're just going to try to run around the wall. In combat, if an illusion is going to be revealed, it's almost always going to be revealed by physical contact. Creatures are going to attack an illusion if it's something that seems hostile. If the wizard conjures up the illusion of an ogre, enemies are either going to run away from it if it's much stronger than them, or they're going to try to attack it, and that physical interaction is going to reveal it as an illusion. The only time I think a creature would make an investigation check against an illusion in combat is if it's blocking them from taking another action. If you seal off a tunnel with the illusion of a metal wall, most creatures aren't going to try to attack a metal wall, so that part of the illusion will hold up. So since they can't take any other actions, that's when the creature takes an investigation action against the illusion. In short, have NPCs treat illusions as real in combat until proven otherwise. They'll run around them, they'll attack them, they'll do whatever they would normally do for that creature or object. Out of combat, illusions get a little bit trickier because when someone will interact with something is not as clear, and why someone would investigate a random object is also very unclear. Out of combat is almost the complete flip of in combat in terms of how illusions will be revealed. Almost all of them will be revealed with investigation checks rather than physical interaction. First thing that I would do is make use of your NPC's passive investigation. While passive investigation is not enough to see through an illusion on its own, it's a good barometer for if an NPC might think something looks off. If an NPC's passive investigation is within about 2 or 3 of the spell save DC, that's when I think they might take the time to make that investigation check and see if they notice that it's an illusion. If they fail, they probably move on and continue with their day, but there's that chance that a smart, high investigation NPC will kind of pick up on things. The other time I see an illusion being investigated out of combat by NPCs is if it disrupts their day-to-day routine or changes a location that they know very well. An illusion that removes a door in an NPC's house, or the illusion of a tree over where their tent just was, is obviously going to prompt an investigation check from them, and in a circumstance like that, you might even give the NPC advantage because they know that there's something wrong there, they just don't quite know what yet. In general, physical interaction with an illusion is going to be very rare outside of combat, and NPCs are rarely going to reveal them in such a way. The only time I see it happening naturally is if it's an illusion that's meant to be interacted with physically. If it's a false bridge or something, the NPCs would notice when they try to walk over it, or something like that. There are 2 exceptions here, being characters with high intelligence and experience with illusions, as well as NPCs that know that there are illusions in the area. In these circumstances, then NPCs might be taking a long stick and just poking anything that looks suspicious to try to reveal it as an illusion, but this is something that should come up very rarely, and only if you really want to establish that this is someone that knows a lot about magic, and more specifically knows how to deal with illusions. And with that, we're done. You should have a good idea of how the primary illusion spells work, the general rules that most of them share, as well as some tips and tricks on how to run them both in and out of combat in a way that is both fair and makes sense for the NPCs involved. The last thing I want to leave you with is, when it comes to illusion spells, if you don't know what to do, try to err in the favor of your players. It's tricky to run illusion spells because you as the DM know that it's not there, but NPCs don't. So if you're ever questioning what an NPC would do, lean towards what would favor your players' actions. Hopefully you're feeling confident about illusions now, but if you have any questions or suggestions on what I should cover for my next video, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for stopping by the Arcanum, and have a great day.